We will begin with learning about our standard, with learning the cell theory. There's cell theory notes below, so if you need to follow along, you can go ahead and use the graphic organizer guide. If not, feel free to do your Cornell notes or whatever kind of notes you would like to take. So the scientists behind the discovery of the cell root to Anton von Leeuwenhoek, and he's the guy that invented the microscope. Without having invented the microscope, there was no way to be able to see a cell because cells are not visible with the naked eye. Robert Hooke, he's probably the only scientist you've known so far because he is the man that named the cells, and he named them after the cells of a monastery, kind of like a gel cell, like little tiny compartments. He was not the first person to see a cell, but he was the first person to name them cells. And he used magnified a cork, like the cork from the wine, and was able to look at a piece of a cork in the microscope and saw little tiny chambers and decided to name them the cell. Schleiden was the scientist who came up with all plants are made up of cells. So Schleiden discovered the fact that plants had cells, and he was the first one to see those and notice any certain distinction. Schwann, on the other hand, is the scientist that discovered that animals are made up of cells. So Schleiden and Schwann had similar roles in the discovery of the cell. Schwann, like swan, the bird, actually was the scientist that discovered that animals, like birds, are made up of cells. For Shao, the first part of the cell theory is all cells come from pre-existing cells. So that means that no cell just appeared from nowhere. That a cell had to be coming from, a cell that already existed. Okay, so the cell theory is made up of 3 parts. The first part is all living things are made of cells, 1 or more cells. So we discovered this in the characteristics of life video, where we looked at all the characteristics and the things that would make something living. Cells has to be a part of living things. The second part of the cell theory is that cells are the basic unit of structure and function for all living things. Structure and function. So that means that things are built the way they are for a specific purpose, and it's because of cells that are giving that purpose. And then the function is directly related to how the cells are organized or how the cells make the organism. Feel free to ask me about cell theory number 2 in case you don't necessarily understand. We will be learning about each cells, all the body cells and the types of cells, the roles that those cells do. And the structure is directly related to the function of the cell. And then the last one is cells come from pre-existing cells, which I mentioned the scientist earlier, Versau, who was the scientist that came up with this part of the cell theory, and that cells come from other cells. There's a lot of other theories that go along with this one, but this is the 3 parts of the cell theory are the ones that you are definitely going to need to know and identify. You also are probably going to need to understand how the scientists played roles in discovering the cell theory.